there is a little bit of a truth in what Ted Cruz is saying here. It's not wrong when you do find yourself on the defense, when you do find yourself defending ridiculous slanders and smears. People end up, I mean, you offer legitimacy to it. Yeah, just like when Ted Cruz says, I'm not a racist, everybody knows you definitely are. I'm not the Zodiac killer. Everybody's like, okay, well, that's what the Zodiac killer would say.
Senator Ted Cruz is with us. Senator, great to have you. This is a full takeover. I think Bill Maher is right. What are your thoughts?
Prisons are set up in our society. I would argue that they do not work. They do not make us safer. The instinct is to just take that person, the source of that harm, the source of that issue, and then just throw them away. Put them in.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, I mean, I know what they're trying to say. They're trying to say that he believes that prisons should be abolished, but it's pretty basic. It's pretty basic stuff. He's just saying that prisons do not actually rehabilitate people and reintegrate them into society. They're just a way to like discard some of the most underserved, underprivileged people.
Put them in a cage and throw away the key. And that doesn't address the reason why that harm was created in the first place. A lot of times, people who create trauma for others are those who themselves went through trauma earlier in their own lives. Right. And I bring all of this up to say that, you know, again, like when we talk about policing, I don't think the system actually makes us safer. I think what it does is it just removes problems out of view.
Yeah. That fuck-ass watermark? Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's right, 100%. But once again, being right doesn't matter. If the overwhelming majority position on shit is wrong, then being right doesn't matter. The best you can do is try to reframe the conversation in a way that people will be more open-minded to your position. A fundamental fact that a lot of left advocates forget, which is that just because you are correct doesn't mean other people will reflect on your words. Okay? That's why one must always remember the educational journey that they went through. For some, it's not as big as a swing as going from right to socialism. Okay, maybe some were liberals and then they found themselves in the throes of socialist literature. But for many others, this is, once again, something that they've been aggressively propagandized against. So you have to do your very best to reframe the language in a way that is more appropriate for people to accept. That's it.
Look, I think the Democrat Party has lost their minds. I got to say, I was amused listening to AOC say, we're not crazy, we're sane. It reminded me of an old friend of mine who talked about what she called bimbo eruptions, which is whenever anyone says, I am not a bimbo, what does everyone think? You're a bimbo. When Richard Nixon said, I am not a crook, all of America said, you know what? He's a crook. In this instance, when AOC stands up and says, we're not crazy, the rest of America says, you're crazy. And methinks she doth protest too much.
Yeah, just like when Ted Cruz says, I'm not a racist, everybody knows you definitely are. I'm not the Zodiac killer. Everybody's like, okay, well, that's what the Zodiac killer would say. There is a little bit of a truth in what Ted Cruz is saying here. It's not wrong when you do find yourself on the defense. When you do find yourself defending ridiculous slanders and smears, people end up, I mean, you offer legitimacy to it. But of course, no one is ever going to ask Ted Cruz, especially on Fox News, how that works with Donald Trump running around being like, I'm not racist. I'm not a dictator. I'm not Jeffrey Epstein's best friend who has been routinely pictured with Jeffrey Epstein, who is my best friend, you know?
Look at Comrade Mamdani, and that's how I call him, as Comrade Mamdani. It is amazing to see New Yorkers vote for someone who is an open communist. He's not a socialist. He's a communist. He's talking about government seizing the means of production. He's talking about massive tax increases and putting the government in charge of the economy. And he is a jihadist. This is someone who went and...
By the way, I mean, I wish. I mean, how could he do that in the New York mayoral race? I don't know, but could you imagine? Oh, centrally planned economy in the United States of America, a robust industrial base, reshoring initiatives, good wages, more worker control, more autonomy in the workplace, all under the directive of a Democratic Party.
Did a photo op with an unindicted co-conspirator.
Yeah, that's my favorite. Hasan, Ted hates communists. They tortured his father, except they were not communists. It was Batista who tortured his father, ironically enough. Him and Marco Rubio both. Him and Marco Rubio both constantly do that. Bro, you're clickbaiting? You mean you wish he was a communist, not a jihadist? Wait, what? Is that what he said? I was talking about... What would jihad have anything to do with central planning? Chatters. Clip culture gonna cook you, bro, please. Famous aspect of a jihad is when you do central planning, a central planned economy. Wait, what the is there a blip? Doesn't matter. It's all over Facebook now. Okay, guys, stop begging for the clips to come, please.
Sir, of the World Trade Center bombing. This is someone who his reaction from 9/11 is not the 3,000 people who were murdered, not the NYPD officers and the New York Fire Department officers who charged into the flames and lost their lives. It was no, his auntie apparently felt bad. This is dangerous. And I got to say, Sean, you know, there are some Republicans who are saying, OK, good. Let them elect a communist in New York. That's going to help Republicans across the country. I got to say I'm not in that camp. New York is an incredibly important American scene. It is the center of finance in America. It is the center of much of media in America. And having one of the most important American cities controlled by a whacked out leftist. And by the way, the whole party has now lined up behind this commie jihadist. And so I am hoping there is some reservoir of common sense in New York that says, let's not go that far. You're right. New Jersey is encouraging. I think we can win the gubernatorial race in New Jersey. And I think Virginia, look, Virginia, what's on the ballot there, you've got their AG candidate who in writing mused about how much he wants to murder the children or see the children of his political opponents.
Yeah, if these guys were so stoked about Zohran's electoral victory and what it means for the future of the Democratic Party, if the Democratic Party was forced to reckon with the left populist flank and run more leftist candidates, and how that would have down ticket consequences for the National Party, a negative down ticket consequence for the National Party, then they wouldn't be crying about Zohran this hard. They would be excited. They would literally say, oh, Zohran's going to be great. Love it. You know, they would say, oh, we don't like any Democrat, but if they chose Zohran, they chose Zohran, right? Except Donald Trump literally wants Andrew Cuomo to win the New York mayoral race, okay? Donald Trump has actively tried to throw hurdles in the direction of the New York mayoral race, claiming if Zohran wins, he's going to cut funds to New York. Like, that is insane. Obviously, if they truly weren't worried and if they were excited at the prospect of Zohran becoming a face of the Democratic Party, they wouldn't be going this crazy against them.
Murdered. That is extreme and radical. And I got to say, I believe in a reservoir of common sense in our country.
All right. So his father's quoted in the New York Post as saying that Nazis took their cues from the United States, history of genocide, ethnic cleansing, official racism and concentration camps. Linda Sassour, you know, that radical. You mentioned this imam that he's friends with.
Yeah, Linda Sarsour is another key figure here that they're talking about. They're trying to get Zohran to sister soldier like all of these people, myself included. Ironically enough, Ironically enough, they can't like it's not really working that much. But what's crazy about this, okay? They're referencing this clip about his dad, for the record. If you actually listen to what he says, you can find every detail here on Wikipedia. None of this is controversial among people who've read books. If you want to describe it as the root of all evil, that's on you. Mohammed Mamdani here is only laying out facts, not judgment.
America is the genesis of what we call settler colonialism. And the American model was exported all around the world. Abraham Lincoln generalized the solution of reservations. They herded American Indians into separate territories. For the Nazis,
by the way, this is not even remotely controversial in academia, but that is the problem. Dude, look at that one little light that is just hitting Kaya in the face. Just one little beam of light. That's so funny. This clip is wild. My dad acted outraged at such a ridiculous notion that I sent him a breath of hard academic evidence of Hitler's 1928 speech where he said this, and he was like, America's not evil, just moving the goalposts and reiterating into his shell. Yeah. What's so crazy is like, this is a crisis of intelligence. This is a crisis of critical thinking. That's what's going on here, where we look to people whose primary function is educating the masses, people who are infinitely better read than the average person, talking about something that they know a million times more about. And we just go, how dare you say this thing that is objectively the truth? It is not a secret that the Nazis looked to America for advice, look to America for what to do. That is just the objective truth. And yet, when you state historical facts, because the overwhelming majority of people now do not give a f- about historical facts at all, and instead think about their own personal feelings, there is significant motion in these kinds of counter narratives being launched against the candidate whose father is an academic.
this was the inspiration. Hitler realized two things. One, that genocide was doable. It is possible to do genocide. That's what Hitler realized. Second thing Hitler realized is that you don't have to have a common citizenship. You can differentiate between people. The Nuremberg laws were patterned after American laws. Anyway, the US put Indians in reservations. The US invented the model.
Isn't most of Americans uneducated enough to fall to this hook, line, and sinker? Yes. This is historically correct information. That's what's so crazy about it. That is what's so crazy about it. Zohran Mamdani's father, America's the root of all evil and inspiration for the Nazis. First of all, you said that. He didn't say that. He said it was the genesis. The American reservation structure was the genesis for the Nazis. And it's literally openly talked about in Nazi texts. He notes that in Mein Kampf, Hitler praises America as the one state that has made progress towards primarily racial conception of citizenship by excluding certain races from naturalization. Whitman writes that the discussion of such influences is almost taboo because the crimes of the Third Reich are commonly defined as the nefandum, the unspeakable descent into what we often call radical evil. But the kind of genocidal hatred that erupted in Germany had been seen before and has been seen since. Only by stripping away its national regalia and comprehending its essential human form do we have any hope of vanquishing it. That concept is precisely what makes it impossible for Zionists to contend with their own fascism. Okay? The unspeakable descent into what we often call radical evil is precisely the reason why people still to this day, when you say, well, Israel behaves exactly like Nazi Germany, they freak the out. They're like, how dare you say that? It's the vast literature on Hitler and Nazism keeps circling around a few enduring questions. The first is biographical. How did an Austrian watercolor painter turned military orderly emerge as a far-right German rabble-rouser after the First World War? The second is socio-political. How did a civilized society come to embrace Hitler's extreme ideas? The third has to do with the intersection of man and regime. To what extent was Hitler in control of the apparatus of the Third Reich? All these questions point to the central enigma of the Holocaust, which has variously been interpreted as a premeditated action and as a barbaric improvisation. Those are the two mainline schools of thought about the Holocaust. Was the final solution always supposed to be the final solution, or was it brought about as conditions worsened for Nazi Germany in the battle lines? Okay. In our current age of unapologetic racism and resurgent authoritarianism, the mechanics of Hitler's rise are a particularly pressing matter. For dismantlers of democracy, there is no better exemplar. Since 1945, the historiography of Nazism has undergone several broad transformations, reflecting political pressures both within Germany and abroad. This was the other part. From boyhood on, Hitler devoured the westerns of the popular German novelist Karl May. In 1928, Hitler remarked approvingly that white settlers in America had gunned down the millions of redskins to a few 100,000. When he spoke of Lebensraum, the German drive for living space in Eastern Europe, he often had America in mind, Manifest Destiny. Among recent books on Nazism, the one that may prove most disquieting for American readers is James Q. Whitman's Hitler's American Model, the United States and the Making of a Nazi Race Law. On the cover, the inevitable swastika is flanked by two red stars. Whitman methodically explores how Nazis took inspiration from American racism of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He notes that in Mein Kampf, Hitler praises America as the one state that has made progress towards... I read this part already. So what Mahmoud, Zohran's father, is saying there is objectively correct. It's just correct. And yet, in a world where truth does not matter, in a world where truth does not matter, you can take an objectively correct statement such as this one, an accurate reflection of historical events, and the roles that the American racialized structure of nationality played in Hitler's very own design in the aftermath, in a post-Nuremberg race law world, for Germany, you can just say, how dare you, and then move on, and people will go along with it. It is insane to me. This is why I often bring up that one Jewish professor of anti-colonial history that was suspended recently. And he was suspended because there was a literal Unit 8200 IDF veteran in his class that was not only harassing the students, but filming them, okay? And why was he doing that? Because the Israel Knesset grant-funded Canary mission had singled him out alongside Congressperson Richie Torres. Remember, this is a Jewish American professor of anti-colonial history. Why had they singled him out as an op? As someone that must be removed from their position in academia? Because he correctly said that Hamas is a national emancipatory resistance group that only operates within the confines of historic Palestine. That is the truth. We are supposed to be able to say the truth in classrooms, especially in classrooms, especially in academia, in college campuses. What the It is crazy that these guys can just turn around and be like, oh, what you said is the truth, but it offends me and I don't like it. And there are plenty of people that go along with it because they've been propagandized into thinking, no, these are barbaric slaughter monsters. How dare you say that there is a logical through line to their acts of militant resistance? Genuine question, logs, please. Is it most of Americans uneducated? My genuine question, and I hope I'm wrong, wouldn't all these attacks be effective against Zohran and make him lose the election? No. So far, this has been ineffective, or at least has had limited effect. if Zohran also wasn't Zohran Mamdani, a brown Muslim guy, and instead was a white boy whose white father was in academia, this wouldn't work at all. It's insane because, like your pal Matt Walsh, you've never actually studied history. You MAGA folks revel in your ignorance and then act shocked and call educated scholars like Mahmoud Mamdani insane. As Pulitzer Prize-winning author John Tolland notes in his book Adolf Hitler, Hitler's concept of concentration camps, as well as the practicality of genocide, owed so much, so he claimed, to his studies of English and United States history. He admired the camps for Boer prisoners in South Africa and for the Indians in the Wild West, and often praised to his inner circle the efficiency of America's extermination by starvation and uneven combat of the red savages who could not be tamed by captivity. Yeah, this is one of the most insane things I've ever heard, Dave Rubin says, and I say that as someone who used to work at the Young Turks. It's mind-boggling. This is not just a war against the truth. It's Republicans have successfully, and Americans by and large, it's not just Republicans, but like American elites have successfully waged war against critical thinking. And they've won. They've won. And you can tweak the algorithm like this so that Dave Rubin's post gets 37,000 likes and Mehdi Hassan's correction gets 3,000 likes. Do you understand? How do you deal with it? How do you deal with the false narratives that Republicans lean into? How do you deal with the largest swaths of American society putting their own personal feelings and what they've maybe half heard or half remembered from their shitty education? How do you put that against people who are invested in the truth? I don't know the answer to it, but I'm not going to stop. Abandon the site. We need to dump capitalist social media entirety. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Shut the up. Stop. Oh my God, I'm starting to get pissed off. Yes, dude, we must close our eyes and plug our ears to where people congregate, to where people talk to one another, because people are too stupid. We must actually cut our movement in half. We must actually do everything we can to gatekeep, live in our own commune. Self-isolation is not the answer to this, okay? You just have to keep fighting because you have no other option. That's it. You have to keep fighting wherever that battle may take, no matter how the institutional power is aligned against you. It doesn't fucking matter. There's nothing else you can do.
That was a character witness for the blind sheikh who was, convicted in the 93 World Trade Center bombing. This is a guy that for weeks and months on end would not condemn the call for global intifada. You heard the montage. He's offering pretty much everything for free, condemning billionaires as people that shouldn't exist, and pledging to confiscate wealth and raise taxes on everybody, and everything's going to be free. This is going to be a case study. Mar's right, and it's going to have great implications because he will not be able to fulfill those promises. The Obamacare promises never fulfilled. Social Security is going bankrupt. Government schools in most blue states and cities are crap. They failed miserably. Defund, dismantle, no bail, reimagine has failed miserably. Open borders has failed miserably. So
I would say we need a new app where the algo isn't abusive of the truth, not abandoning it, but competing against it. Brother, who? With whose money? On whose servers? Who's making this happen? Oh my God, this is where the blue sky truthers come out. Jesus Christ. Oh. People thinking Hasan radicalizes chat. Meanwhile, chat trying to radicalize him. No, they can't. They can't radicalize someone who is already a radical, but has a more pragmatic approach to what must be done. This is simply a difference in opinion in tactics and methods. That's all it is.
America's going to get to judge this. I think it may be a good thing in a weird way. Thought on that?
Yeah, look, what you just said there, that Bill Maher is right, that's something I don't say all that often, although I got to say I'm saying it more and more often because Maher is an old school liberal who actually believes in things like free speech, who doesn't want to see the Democrat Party become a communist party. And I think America is better when you have two parties that are somewhere reasonably near the middle and you can have disagreements. I don't think it's good for America when one of the two parties is absolutely nuts. You mentioned Comrade Mamdani's father. I played on my podcast, Verdict with Ted Cruz, today's entire...
So you see no value and we're going to make X irrelevant?
podcast is on Mamdani and laying out his radical record. His father also said that Abraham Lincoln was the model for Adolf Hitler. Now, I want you to stop and think, how much do you hate America if you say that Adolf Hitler modeled his behavior after Abraham Lincoln? That is who Comrade Mamdani suckled after. And I'm just hoping, New Yorkers, we don't want to see an enormously important city run by someone who hates America, who blames, who thinks Lincoln and Adolf Hitler are comparable. I'm just praying that there's a moment of pulling back and saying, this doesn't make any sense, because the alternative is really bad for our country.
Let me ask you. J.D. Vance, the vice president, slammed Mamdani for making his auntie the real victim of 9/11.
Yeah.
I never saw him cry over the people that died that day or their families.
Brother, he was 9 years old. He was 9 years old. He was 9 years old on 9/11 in New York. If your attitude is that everyone in New York suffered on 9/11, then Zohran is a part of everyone. The problem is, when these guys cynically say everyone suffered on 9/11, they don't mean everyone suffered on a 9/11. They don't think that Muslims are a part of the in-group, okay? Even a 9-year-old Muslim boy.
Not a word.
20 seconds.
Not a word. Look, not a word, and you should not be cheering on the jihadists who flew the planes into the buildings. You should be standing up for the people of New York, and Mamdani will not do that. I very much hope and pray he loses.
Okay, Senator, appreciate it.
Don't understand it. Why wouldn't you want him to win so that you can say the entire Democratic Party is like this? By the way, Ted Cruz, I know one person who was cheering on 9/11, or at least jorking his penis on 9/11, and that man is Ted Cruz. That's what Ted Cruz was doing on 9/11. Many years after the fact, but if you remember, he accidentally publicly liked porn on 9/11 a couple years ago. Yeah, so he did do that. That's how he was choosing to honor the memory of the fallen. Corey Chase incest porn, no less. Yep. He was horny on Maine, dude. Yep. Ted Cruz Twitter account likes pornographic tweet. Married Texas senator who once defended a ban on sex toys asked to explain how his account came to like the graphic post. From sexual posts. Be careful showing this. I mean, it's censored. Obviously, it's on The Guardian, dude. Yeah. He was trying to raise a tower of his own. He was trying to erect. Your Honor, I was trying to erect my very own tower in honor. A little bit of porn-a-rooney on 9/11. Gets me going. Someone posted a screenshot of when Hasan changed his Twitter name to it too. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Ted Cruz actually retweeted me once, and I changed my name to Ted Cruz liked porn on 9/11. Anyway, let's just continue.
Now just a week away, Andrew Cuomo is now gaining some ground on frontrunner Zohran Mamdani, according to one new poll. And early voting numbers are on the rise compared to 4 years ago, with older voters outnumbering younger voters so far. Christina Fan has the latest.
Zohran Mamdani refusing to grow complacent, campaigning on a radio station Tuesday morning while still leading his competitors by double digits.
We never trust the polls. We go out there and earn every vote ourselves. That's what we got to do the next 7 days so we can be the next mayor of New York City.
The most recent poll by Suffolk University Boston does show Cuomo closing in, cutting Mamdani's 20-point lead by half. The Democratic Socialist is at 44, Cuomo 34, Curtis Sliwa 11.
I encourage a continued turnout. The people will choose it. Not the billionaires, not the insiders, not the influencers who have been wrong every step of the way.
More than 223,000 New Yorkers have cast their ballots in the first 3 days of early voting. An analysis shows a dramatic age shift. Voters over 50 far outnumber younger ones who helped propel Mamdani to his dominant win over Cuomo in the Democratic primary.
There's anger in this city. There's frustration in this city. It's all percolating, and you can feel it out there.
Political analysts say the person with the most influence in the final days of this race is Curtis Sliwa, who refuses to back out. When his supporters were asked who their second choice is for mayor, 36% said Cuomo, 2% Mamdani. Reporting from Jackson Heights and Queens, Christina Fan, CBS News, New York.
Be sure to stay with CBS News New York for the latest heading up to Election Day. For more information on early voting, including polling hours and locations, you can head to our website, CBS New York.
At this point, would it be too hypocritical for Sliwa to drop out? I don't think he will. I hope he doesn't. Anyway, analysis of what a new poll shows in the New York City mayoral race. In one poll, older voters so far, a lot of qualifiers that make a statement like Cuomo's surging. It's still worrisome. It's worrisome, and the Zohran campaign is using it as a way to get people to lock in and not feel comfortable about their victory. Okay?
All right, we are 1 week away from Election Day. The race for mayor entering its final stretch, and Election Day approaching quickly next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, all right. Early voting getting underway over the weekend, and some of the early numbers could spell a change in the wind for our candidates, depending. Good Day's Robert Moses is here now with the very latest. Robert, what's going on?
Dan and Tashani, at this exact moment, 1 week from today, we will be talking about how polls have just opened here in the city in the most consequential election the city has seen in recent memory. It's a race the whole country is watching. Last night, Zohran Mamdani appeared on The Daily Show.
Are you going back to New York City for Election Day? I was planning on it, but I have so much travel that I don't know if I can swing it. Because like right after I have to be in D.C. and then right after I have to fly to China. So it's the difference between like being away for 20 days versus being away for like 30 plus days. Who cares about DC? I'm doing CrookedCon.
Jon Stewart asked him if he's at all bothered by how long it has taken some Democrats to endorse him, like Hakeem Jeffries, or by the fact that some Democrats haven't endorsed him at all. Mamdani says endorsements only mean so much.
It's part of what gave Cuomo the sense of inevitability in the primary. He just seemed to pick up all of these different endorsements. And I think what we showed in many ways was that the days of endorsements deciding elections, those days have come to an end. It's the people that build up a campaign.
Earlier, Mamdani addressed the controversy that has embroiled his campaign over the last few days. On Friday, as he talked about post-9/11 Islamophobia, he mentioned an aunt who stopped taking the subway because she did not feel safe in her hijab. Well, after that comment, critics determined that Mamdani's one direct biological aunt actually didn't fit the description that he gave. So yesterday, Mamdani acknowledged that, in fact, he was not speaking about his aunt.
I was speaking about Zehra Fouhi, my father's cousin, who sadly passed away a few years ago. For the takeaway from my more than 10-minute address about Islamophobia in this race and in this city to be the question of my aunt tells you everything about Andrew Cuomo and his inability to reckon with a crisis of his own making.
Speaking of the former governor, there are a couple of encouraging signs for Cuomo. A new Suffolk University poll of likely voters shows him trailing Mamdani by 10 percentage points. This is encouraging because if you compare this survey to one that Suffolk took last month when Mayor Eric Adams was still in the race, Mamdani was up 20, so his lead has now been cut in half, according to Suffolk University. And Gothamist crunched some numbers, did some analysis of early voting data, and what Gothamist came up with is that more than half of those who voted early this weekend are 55 and older. Experts say that could be an encouraging sign for Cuomo.
The choice is as stark as you think. He is inexperienced. You're right. He is divisive. You are right. He is not about bringing New Yorkers together. He's about dividing New Yorkers.
Republican Curtis Sliwa remains in the mix as well, much to the chagrin of those who fear that his presence will hand City Hall to Mamdani.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Every day, Zohran is like, I love Jewish New Yorkers. I'm going to do everything in my power to save Jewish New Yorkers, to protect Jewish New Yorkers. And all Cuomo has to say is Zohran is going to do 9/11 just like all of the Muslim New Yorkers that came before him. And then he's the one who's divisive. I hate this shit. I think if Obabe was a real one who did actually care about the future of this country, he'd come out and be like, I've seen a lot of similar rhetoric launched against me. This young mind is exactly the kind of young talent that we need to see in the Democrat Party. He will never do that, of course. And just bury all of this shit. Let me be clear. Keep dreaming, Law. I'm just saying, if he was the real champion of democracy, or even a person who was remotely invested in the future of the Democratic Party, or remotely invested in fighting against the growing wave of American fascism, he would do that. Instead, he's busy endorsing the CIA candidates.
Mamdani. Former Governor David Paterson teased an endorsement of Cuomo. Paterson endorsed the former governor in the primary. Then he backed Adams once Cuomo lost the primary. Now he's likely coming back to support Cuomo. All of that gives Sliwa a case of endorsement whiplash.
If I were Governor David Paterson, who I know well, I would stop making an embarrassment of myself, because this guy can't figure out from one day to the next who he's endorsing.
And we are seeing record early voting numbers here in the city. So far, after 3 days of early voting, more than 223,000 people have cast ballots across the 5 boroughs. If you compare that to 4 years ago, a little more than 45,000 had voted after 3 days of early voting. So that means we're seeing nearly 5 times the turnout this year that we saw back in 2021. Really extraordinary numbers as we're barreling toward Election Day. Tashani and Dan, back to you.
Extraordinary. That's a good way to put it, Robert. Thank you very much. It is.
Please, please, do not underestimate our opponents. They have a huge amount of money, so I urge you, forget about the polls. Go into this election assuming that you are 5 points behind. A year ago, very few people in New York knew about a 33-year-old assemblyman named Zohran Mamdani. Nobody knew who this guy was. He created an extraordinary and unprecedented grassroots movement. So what you guys are going to have to do, along with the other 80,000 volunteers, you've got to do everything that you can to bring people to the polls.
Zohran is holding a New York City briefing for new media. What the f is this? Is there a better angle?
On in the campaign, and finding that about a 1-minute video was more effective than videos that we had spent weeks trying to plan out, because it was one that could get to the heart of what people actually cared about and do so in a manner that didn't feel like it was a lecture. It actually just felt like it was a reflection of what you were already thinking about, and you could have a good time while engaging in it. And I think, as you said, in the next 7 days, this is a time to win an election.
You didn't get the invite, brother. I live in Los Angeles.
What motivates having this press conference with all of you is to reach out to New Yorkers, not just those who are already engaging with politics, but those who are just engaging with the world around them, and for many of them through the content that you all make, and trying to make the case for a city that you can afford through every single medium we can find. I mean, I can tell you I've been running for mayor for more than a year. Some of my closest friends, the only interview they have watched me give is flagrant. and I think it's indicative of the fact that politics can't just be the way that it's always been. It has to actually look and feel more like the life around us. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not, it's literally inaudible. All right, let's just continue. New York City mayor's race narrows as election day approaches, and we're going to be talking about that. This is a black-pilling moment.
Election day, now just 1 week away. Early voting in the New York City mayor's race has seen a much stronger turnout than 4 years ago.
It comes as Andrew Cuomo is now gaining ground on Zohran Mamdani in the polls. Christina Fan is live at an early voting site in Jackson Heights, Queens. Christina.
Mary and Chris, good morning.
It's crazy the left is even outside the Imperial Core still have infighting and splitting. How is that always so difficult? What are the major disagreements that these groups have that split them? Or are they actually being sabotaged by liberals? No. As much as I would like to say it's the liberals or it's the reactionaries that infiltrate these movements, and there are some instances where they do that, this has been an endless problem on the left. If you ever look to the history of successful socialist revolutions and unsuccessful revolutionary movements, reformist, revisionist movements, it just always is. It always has existed. There is a reason why every single important Marxist, socialist thinker, even during a successful revolution, has spent endless amounts of time constantly criticizing other delineations and other tendencies amongst the left. There's never been a moment where successful law, yes, I would say the USSR was the aftermath of a successful revolution. If you can design a state, then your revolution was successful. You might not agree with like how the state is managed after that. Okay. I think a lot of the infighting also stems from how overwhelming the forces of capital are. It makes it virtually impossible to design any sort of discipline in any sort of movement, especially because a lot of people have very different versions of what it means to be authoritarian and what it means to be a democratically organized movement. And those differences become fairly consequential in the grand scheme of things. And no one turns around and goes, okay, we've actually achieved this success. We've actually destroyed Tsarist Russia. Now it's time for us to unify. It never works that way. It happens at every point. The American left, which is virtually non-existent, okay, is a great example of this. Even when we got no class consciousness as a country, even when we have no real robust left movement in the country, people are still constantly eating each other alive, talking about how different it is, okay? Constantly talking about how it's bullshit.
More than 223,000 people have cast their ballots during the first 3 days of early voting, and there appears to be a surge of older voters. They are outnumbering younger New Yorkers who helped propel Zohran Mamdani to his dominant win over Andrew Cuomo in the Democratic primary. Zohran Mamdani all smiles as he appeared on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart Monday night, confident his legion of 90,000 volunteers will bring him to victory over the finish line, despite a new poll showing Andrew Cuomo surging.
Making buses faster, free delivering universal child care. These are not just slogans.
Right.
These are commitments.
Chatter's wrong. There are liberation groups who aren't even infighting and formed a united front. Not exactly socialist Marxists. PFLP and DFLP are the only ones who had a split along ideological lines. Hamas and PIJ were created on their own terms, not socialist, but still liberationists. Yes. Yes. I know. This is true. And ultimately, they still had a singular focus in fighting back against the Israeli occupation. So they could unite in their militancy, in their efforts of militancy, because of how oppressive Israel has been. So historically, and even in contemporary society, the only time where a dominated population ever actually gets together and casts aside whatever differences in opinion that they have is when they're singularly focused on an emancipatory struggle, when they're singularly focused on overcoming a fascist movement or overcoming an ethno-nationalist apartheid project such as Israel, or overcoming the utter domination of Tsarist Russia. Those are the only instances where people actually successfully get together and fight back. So much so that I can point to you the endless civil war that existed between Maoists and the nationalists in China. They also dropped their infighting to do a little collab special in an effort to fight against the Japanese genocide that was taking place. They literally did that. They were like, all right, we got to do a little bit of a collab here. Okay? W collab. Is Zohran losing? What's happening? He's not, but so far, the early numbers that have come out do not look too good. Okay? And we're going to talk about that. It's not because this is CBS. There is certainly a little bit of validity, so much so that even the Zohran campaign itself has actually used this as an opportunity to spark the light under the asses of a lot of people. Okay, they also put out a press notification saying Cuomo's cut our lead in half from 20 to 10. And a lot of older people are voting in the early voting. The early voting numbers look crazy, okay? They're like 5xing previous early voting numbers. And unfortunately for Zohran, the early voting numbers off of demographics are 55-plus-year-olds that favor Cuomo over Zohran. Now, they favor Cuomo over Zohran by a small margin, okay? They favor Cuomo over Zohran in the 55-plus demographic over, like oftentimes around like 4 points. Having said that, it's still a cause for concern. The socialist labeling is one of the biggest uphill battles that will always work against the progressive. I don't think it's the socialist label. I think it's more so just straightforward racism. I think the mailers and the flyers and presenting Zohran as like this scary threat to New York that's going to do 9/11 10 times over if he becomes mayor is working with the boomers, with the white boomers, and not even just the white boomers, with the black boomers and brown boomers as well. Mike from PA told me that younger people vote late into early voting, so you see a bias towards higher age early in early voting. Sure. But you have to understand, like, a lot of us look to that stuff and instantly think this is gross, right? This is gross. This is racist. This is bullshit. But what we consider to be bullshit, many older people do not. Many older people say, "Oh my God, this is terrifying." Okay, there are numerous factors in here that must be considered. I think people's tendency to be duped by the algorithm plays a role in this as well. After all, I just spent the last 30 minutes covering people who are our age coming in here to be like, I just saw that you're quitting on TikTok. Why the is that a thing? Right? It kind of feels like people do have a tendency to be duped. For all the people that have come in here to check on their own, I'm sure there are tens of thousands of people who just made up their minds that I had actually quit. You know? I do think what's funny about this is that a lot of Zohran's policies unironically help the old. Like when you look at rent stabilized housing, like it's people that were lucky enough to get into rent stabilized housing and stayed there for many, many years. So it's like working old folk. And even then, who knows if they receive that message. Meanwhile, you know who is anti-old? Andrew Cuomo. He slaughtered the old of New York during COVID.
And when we deliver them here in New York City, it will be also the delivery of a politics that can actually aspire for more than what you're living through.
The new Suffolk University poll has Mamdani at 44, Cuomo 34, Curtis Sliwa 11. Cuomo has been closing the gap. Mamdani had a 20-point lead in the poll back in September.
I feel very good because New Yorkers, at the end of the day, they want a mayor who can do the job.
But can Cuomo make up 10 points in 8 days with people already voting?
polls can change in a second. And, you know, I expect there'll be a couple, maybe one or two more that might show it's back to 20 or might show it's down to 5. So it's a pretty volatile race. But certainly this is as close as he's gotten.
Early voters have been coming out in record numbers. At the end of day 3, more than 223,000 have already cast a ballot, with Brooklyn and Manhattan leading the way.
We have unprecedented early turnout. Some of that obviously is because I'm running as the only Republican. So let the people determine who becomes the next mayor.
And according to the latest poll, about 7% of those surveyed say they remain undecided. Reporting live from Jackson Heights, Queens, Christina Fan, CBS News, New York.
Christina, thank you.
It is mind-boggling to me that for boomers, I mean, if the fear-mongering coming from CBS News remains, okay, then boomers don't want any policy. They just don't want a brown guy. Okay. They just straight up are like, oh, what are the policies that this guy's offering? Fast and free buses, rent freeze for rent stabilized units in New York, universal child care, a tax on the super wealthy potentially. Okay, great. What's the other side offering? I'm not brown and Muslim. I also may or may not have raped a cop, and also am responsible for killing many of your friends. But guess what? I'm not a Mohammedan, and I don't like 9/11, whereas Zohran clearly loves it. After all, he is brown and Muslim. He is Mohammedan. My opponent, ladies and gentlemen of the elderly, is very much a Muslim man who would like to do the Islamic Caliphate. And every boomer's like, oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. This is the best. This is, well, you sold me. You sold me. It's just crazy because like, I don't know. It's hard not to feel discouraged. Mamdani voters overwhelmingly say they're voting for him, but a huge chunk of Cuomo voters say they're mainly voting against Mamdani. 40% of Cuomo voters are voting for Cuomo, and 40% are voting against Mamdani. Whereas for Mamdani, 80% of voters are voting for Mamdani, and only 15% are voting against Cuomo. And no, it's not because they Googled Hasan Piker 9/11 chatters. I am utterly irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, okay? This is what I was trying to explain to you. Hasan Piker 9/11 is not a banger. What's a banger is constantly reminding people that Zohran is a Muslim person and consistently hitting him on the lines of, he's Muslim, he's Muslim. Remember how Muslim he is. Remember, Muslims did 9/11. Have you not seen the attack ads, especially on Twitter? Everywhere you look, they just go, he's eating with his hands. He's eating rice with his hands. He's Muslim. He's scary Muslim terrorist. If Zohran was a white guy, if Zohran was a white dude, okay, and his name was Jedediah, okay, do you think any of that shit would work against him? No. Look at Grant Plattner. Grant Plattner had a goddamn totem cough on his chest. The fuck are we talking about? White people literally see a dude who went on 3 tours, who then signed up to be like an embassy security guy for Blackwater, who had a totem cough on his chest and go, oh, that's a corked up white boy. I'm on board. F it. Let's go. Zohran doesn't have any of that shit and yet gets yelled at about his anti-Semitism non-stop. Hasan Piker 9/11. Yeah, the last time that popped off was July. It was August of 2019 when I said what I said, ironically enough, and I got a lot of media coverage over it. Do you think Zohran would get benefit from getting a Nazi tattoo? No, because Zohran isn't white. That's my point. Zohran isn't white. Grant Plattner is literally doing town halls in towns in Maine that have like 2,000 people population total, with like 700 people. So like he's literally currently doing town halls where half the population of the town are at the town hall. Ain't nobody gives a whiteness is a superpower. Being white is so OP. Being a white man, oh my God, is the most overpowered shit. I'm making a comparison between Zohran Mamdani, who has a unblemished, unvarnished track record and has great policies, and yet people seemingly still can't overcome the fact that he's brown. Okay? That's it. That's it. Have seen a bunch of people declare this to be a devastating blow for Mamdani, but October, yeah, I mean, I talked about this as well. But October polls show Cuomo only has a 4-point average lead among older voters. In Suffolk County, 55 to 64, Cuomo plus 3, 65 plus, Cuomo plus 4. For 65 plus, Cuomo's lead against Mamdani for 65 plus year old voters is a 0.1 on the AARP poll. For Fox News, 65 plus goes to Cuomo by plus 10. Okay, that's the most like devastating poll. And no, just because it's Fox News doesn't mean that they're not a reputable pollster. They are a reputable pollster. They are a reputable pollster. Don't get sidetracked here by Fox News. Quinnipiac says for 65 plus, Cuomo has a plus 4 lead. Okay? This, to me, is actually devastating for Cuomo. Cuomo should be cleaning up the New York olds, right? Name recognition, a tendency to overlook all of the past shit that Andrew Cuomo has done. Andrew Cuomo is exactly the type of person that like New York olds would vote for. So the very fact that he's only got a plus 4 lead on the 65 plus line is crazy. It's so crazy that it makes me feel like he already killed all of his voters, and that's the reason why he's only got a plus 4 lead on 65 plus. Because on the other side, when you go back beyond 55, when you go to like 35 to 18 category, it's not even a question. But of course, there is a lot more mobilization for the olds. Old people love voting. Young people don't love voting. Young people are hard to get out to vote. Does this mean that voters will, like the young voters will actually turn out in numbers necessary to overcome the olds? We shall see. My actual issue with this is Mamdani needs a mandate, because without it, the sharks will smell the blood in the water. No, I mean, it's fine. It is, mandate or not, Mamdani victory here is fantastic. It's phenomenal. Okay. Mike from PA said the older voters tended to vote in the first days of the early voting, while younger early voters tend to vote in the later part of the early voting periods. I trust Michael from Pennsylvania, especially when it comes to elections. He has a pretty good understanding of this stuff. I don't think it's copium for people who think like, you know, he's coping or whatever, or it's no longer Cuomo over, it's Zohran over. People who are saying we're cooked off the first sign of bad news have PTSD. It's understandable why people have PTSD in this situation. Okay? If you are a part of the left, you probably have developed an understanding that in most circumstances, every single force of capital will be against you, as we have seen in this election. Okay? And people are unfortunately malleable. Okay? People are unfortunately malleable. They are endlessly persuadable, especially when it comes to racialized sentiment and things of that nature. They very clearly respond to it. This was a factor in Kamala Harris's election chances as well, certainly. Not the most consequential factor, but the factor that made all of her negative qualities come across as irredeemable. Okay? And the same goes for Zohran. Despite having an unvarnished track record and has maintained tremendous messaging discipline over the key policies that he wants to implement, there are still plenty of people who can't get over the notion that, you know, you're going to have a Muslim mayor. Oh my God, that's terrifying. And I'm not just saying that. I'm not just saying that because of the Islamophobic. The reason why I'm saying that is because that's the only. That is the only thing that Cuomo has been attacking him on. Okay, that's the only thing. That's it. They've attacked him on nothing other than the fact that he is Muslim in the last 2 weeks. This is what's happening with boomers in New York City? Yeah.
What about our traffic problem? 9, 11.
I agree with that. We like to think that we're so brilliant, we're so smart, and we're not susceptible to propaganda. But honestly, people are by and large very stupid. And I think we forget that this is not some concerted anti-Muslim hatred. It's totally banal. They saw a Fox News segment, don't care about following the race or politics, and go spend 5 minutes to vote for some dude who has a familiar name. And that's like 95% of people. Yes. For a lot of people, that's what it takes. No one is immune to propaganda. No one. What is this? After getting busted in a lie, his aunt wasn't even in New York City during 9/11, and who doesn't wear a hijab? Zohran now says it was a distant cousin, not his aunt, who was afraid to wear a hijab in 9/11 in New York City because of 9/11. Oops, my aunt is my cousin. Leftist talking points collapse. This is what I mean. Like, this is not a real, this is not a real story, but it doesn't matter. And by that, I don't mean like Zohran is faking it. I'm saying like all of the anger towards this anecdote, okay? All of the anger and animosity directed towards this anecdote is because it's a real anecdote that many Muslims have experienced in the aftermath of 9/11, and these guys hate that shit. They don't want to hear it at all. Okay? So their gotcha is a dude calling a distant relative an auntie, okay? As opposed to saying like my dad's distant cousin. How do you explain that to people? How do you explain that to white people? I guess like white people don't do that. They don't like consider other familial relatives aunties, you know?
So recently, in a recent address about Islamophobia, you referenced your aunt and some of the harassment.
Like think about how much people are overlooking Andrew Cuomo's faults and failures, and think about how much of a bigger story they are desperately trying to make this. And it hasn't stopped. Like the New York Times literally worked with a white supremacist, race realist guy that is like popping on TikTok to say that Zohran had actually lied on his college application for a university that he didn't even go to. Like that was months ago. That was the story. So they've been at it. The New York Times has been at it. They haven't stopped. I need you to understand, New York Times is supposed to be either unbiased in this regard or kind of liberal adjacent. And yet, for some reason, they hammered that super hard early on. It didn't work, but that didn't stop them. This is not only a anecdote that every single Muslim has had, like a similar experience, where they have someone who's like a distant or immediate relative or themselves have experienced this. Okay, this is a very common experience, but God forbid you bring it up. Everyone will chop that shit up into oblivion and try to act as though you're lying about it.
Facing post 9/11. Is that a blood relative? Mm-hmm. Yes, I was speaking about my aunt. I was speaking about Zehra, my father's cousin, who sadly passed away a few years ago. And for the takeaway from my more than 10-minute address about Islamophobia in this race and in this city to be the question of my aunt tells you everything about Andrew Cuomo and his inability to reckon with a crisis of his own.
Yeah, he says my father's cousin. That's who I was referencing as an aunt. And Ted Cruz, of course, didn't even listen to it. Oops, my aunt is my cousin. Leftist talking points collapse. 44,000 likes. Do you think this is organic? I don't. I don't think this is organic at all. I'm sorry. I have seen a metric ton more Islamophobia than ever before since the ceasefire. Okay? And it is being directed. It is being directed at Zohran aggressively. Yeah, see, breaking. It has been revealed that the aunt Zohran Mamdani shed fake tears over, claiming she stopped riding the subway after 9/11 because she didn't feel safe wearing her hijab. Neither wore a hijab nor lived in New York City at the time. She lived in Tanzania. 124,000 likes, 6.7 million views. It's insane, brother. How is this driving discourse? How is this driving discourse, man? 6.7 million views. There are 100K plus likes on any given Islamophobic tweet, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's just who the demographic of Twitter is nowadays. There's two things at play here. One, the anti-Zohran bots are out. Okay? The anti-Zohran bots are out. The problem is, botting does work in terms of shaping public discourse and public attitudes. When you see something go buck wild on Twitter, even if you're a normal human being, it actually has a tendency to shape your perspective. Okay? It has a tendency to shape your perspective. You go, wow, a lot of people believe this. Maybe this is actually f***ed up. Okay? And the same goes for not just the, where are you going? Kaya, where are you going? Oh, God. Uh-oh. Hello. Place. Kaya, place. Abuse. Dog abuse. Dog abuse. Two things I think are important to factor here is, number one, I said this already with the City Hall Bureau Chief for New York Times, Emma G. Fitzsimmons, talking about Zohran Mamdani is pressed on La Mega Radio if he lied when he said his aunt stopped taking the subway after September 11th attacks. Mamdani said, it's not a lie. My father's cousin is my aunt. He said that was how he referred to her growing up. To which I said, this is turning into an Obama tan suit level controversy. Now, the thing is, the tan suit is stupid. In hindsight, we look back at it and we point to it as like a silly a point of controversy, or the Dijon mustard controversy. Like Obama famously was yelled at for shit like that. Okay? As opposed to valid reasons to criticize him, which everyone obviously had universal consensus over, like extrajudicial killings in the drone war and things of that nature. But they hit him with like the dumbest shit. But while it was happening, that was a big point of contention. It's virtually impossible to explain to people now that was a mover, man. That was a mover and shaker. Like, people actually unironically would talk about how unpresidential it was that Obama was wearing a tan suit, or how elitist and out of touch and entitled he was for demanding Dijon mustard, or the fact that he wasn't a real American, the fact that he actually faked his birth certificate. In your stream with him, he broadly used uncle or aunt for elderly people. This is so silly. I know. And the other thing that's going on here, obviously, is that Israel can't win Americans over anymore, so its defenders have decided to disparage Muslims instead. And it seems to be working so far. Poll-tested messaging being used by Hasbras to make public more amenable towards Israel. 1, fear-mongering about Muslims. 2, Jews were promised Palestine. 3, blaming Palestinians for continuing to resist their murder and displacement. About half of all Europeans were generally misinformed about the state of Israel as a democracy offering freedom of religion, having rights for women and gays. Fear of the threat of Islamic jihadism is prevalent throughout Europe. Europeans believe that the Hamas casualty numbers are accurate and that mostly civilians were killed. They agree with the language of Israel being a genocidal apartheid country, even though it contradicts their opposition to Hamas and Iran. Top messages in Europe mostly echo what worked in the U.S., that Hamas fosters a culture of death and hate, celebrating atrocities, that the purpose of Hamas is to destroy all Jews and spread jihadism. They also question the alliance with the left, given the cultural anti-gay position of Iran and Hamas. Two other key messages. The Jewish people need a homeland, and Hamas, at this point, should just give up. Most importantly, all countries showed significant shifts after the messaging, averaging over 20 points, especially once the situation in Gaza is resolved. The room for growth in all countries is very significant. This was from a leaked document, okay, that was commissioned by the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs to basically restructure how Israel needs to propagandize going forward. And one of their key findings was to just say Islamic barbarism and Muslims are a plague on Europe, and try to tie that back to Israel is fighting the same battles that you're fighting on the home front. You have to keep this in mind when thinking about how aggressively the Islamophobia has been tuned up. Yeah, and they're doing it. Like, they're openly doing it. Eric Doherty, just in 2 major American cities about to elect Muslim communists as mayor. Unreal. The consequences of being legally invaded. These cities are dooming themselves. 51,000 likes. And now with the purchase of TikTok, they can hammer on these messages over and over and over again until it sticks. Meanwhile, messages like this, even though Ted Cruz misread, or Ted Cruz just simply read this and didn't even listen to the video, okay, and is dunking on Zohran, gets 45,000 likes. Van's response, honestly, the fact that y'all don't get this auntie cousin thing just tells me that you guys are super elite, non-regular family having people. This is truly insanely ridiculous. Only 6,000 likes. That's it. Israel realizes that they cannot defend Israel in the United States of America. Random moment from your stream where he broadly uses uncle.
How are we going to get people out? They were actually uncles from, not just from Queens, Bronx.
All the uncles got together.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no. You're a star. Yeah. It's so stupid, man. And even white boys do it too nowadays, especially with like the TikTok. Especially with like TikTok making it more, TikTok and AAVE flowing through TikTok in general. Unk is like a part of the common vernacular at this point. Like, I'm not actually Jason the Ween's real life uncle, but I call him my nephew. Okay? W nephew. W Unk. He's not literally my nephew. Okay? Yeah. I cannot believe we're having any time, we're expending any sort of time litigating this. But that's the point. They make a big deal out of this shit, and then they push you to be on the defensive. And every moment that you spend defending the truth is another moment that they can chop away at the limited amount of time you have presenting a positive message. This happens all the time with like silly internet drama. It literally happens nonstop on the internet. And those tactics are being utilized in the political sphere, or they were being utilized in the political sphere, and now it's being utilized in the internet drama sphere. Because like this is how Oppo works. This is how manufactured outrage works. Okay? So why not address it one time and move on? Because the media is playing a formative role in this. The media constantly brings it up. That's it. That's it. America's most important social thinker on AuntieGate.
I would say like 80% of ethnic groups are exactly the same, and everybody pretends like everyone's like, oh, we're always late. We eat a lot. We have
Totally.
guilt. And it's like, that is everyone but wasps, I think.
This is quite literally the last third of my current hour is like, that like everyone is the same because everyone says they value family and food and they think they invented family and we just like to get together. And it's not just family, actually, it's relatives, like relatives.
You know, a guy I thought was my uncle wasn't even related to me. It's like, most people are like that.
Or people are like, you know, we call her an auntie. I'm like, I'm familiar.
I do think that is probably just how much like wasp culture is like dominant in, but it's like they are the outlier.
Can you explain what WASP means? It means white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. It is the most domineering culture in America. It is the people that designed this country. It is the people that have shaped the culture of this country. This shit is just like Collargate. They're throwing whatever they can to see what sticks. It's like going forward, every Zohran post will have 20 bots posting about his aunt. Exactly. The Tish family put 1.2 mil against Mamdani. Meet the billionaire spending over six figures to stop Zohran from becoming New York's next mayor. From Michael Bloomberg to Bill Ackman. I know, we covered this already. Like, this is not irrelevant, okay? This is not irrelevant. This is a major, major issue. Billionaires see the popular mandate that a guy like Zohran has, and they want to stop it no matter what. This is not only like Collargate, it's every single Republican bred narrative. I know, that's why I didn't bring that up. I brought up the Obama tan suit controversy, okay? The Obama tan suit controversy is perfect. Now, obviously, that wasn't an election controversy, but birtherism is an election-related controversy that was unimaginably racist. And while Zohran is still up in the polls, this is just early panicking, but it means something, okay? I'm not saying it's over. I'm simply saying that the very fact that you can literally just dial up Islamophobia to such a degree and actually yield results like this in a campaign that is utterly devoid of policy prescriptions. Because Andrew Cuomo's campaign, name one policy of Andrew Cuomo's. I can give you two, and I've been paying close attention, okay? And that's the only reason why I can tell you two key policy proposals. 5,000 new cops for the NYPD and making sure that Zohran Mamdani cannot live in a rent, a adjusted rent apartment unit. Like evicting Zohran Mamdani and 5,000 more cops. That's it. That's literally not that's not a thing. It is utterly devoid of policy. It's just simply a Zohran campaign. And all of the Zohran initiatives up until this very moment have been an abject failure, with the exception of Islamophobia. The reason why he was able to cut the lead in some of these polls by 10 points is because Zohran is Muslim and he just keeps hammering the Islamophobia shit over and over again. And the more the uninitiated hear about that, the more the random people who are like, oh, there's a mayoral election, let me tune in now. The more they hear about that, the more they go, ooh, maybe this guy will do 9/11. Okay? That's it. This is the time where Zohran has to lock the in and just stick to the messaging. This is the most important part of his campaign in terms of messaging discipline. Coasting on previous popularity won't work at all, because this is where the actual voters are coming into play. The broad majority of voters who have not been paying too close attention to what the is going on. This is where, if you live in New York, you got to get your parents and your grandparents to go out and vote for Zohran Mamdani. Okay? That's it. This is where you have to canvass extra hard. It's not a time to feel like Zohran is going to coast to victory. Okay? Not at all. You have to be playing as though he's down 10 points, not up 20. Okay? New York City Democratic mayoral nominee Zohran Mamdani holds a commanding lead over former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who is running as an independent, according to a poll released 1 week before Election Day. The 5-day Manhattan Institute survey, which closed Sunday, shows Mamdani leading with 43% of likely voter support, followed by Cuomo's 28% and Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa's 19%. Around 8% were undecided. This is a good poll that came out for Zohran, but it doesn't matter. There are a bunch of bad polls. Like, even in the bad polls, he's still leading by 10. But the very fact that Andrew Cuomo seemingly could cut 10 points into Zohran's commanding lead after not really presenting anything new or unique beyond talking about how Zohran Mamdani is a Mohammedan terrorist is a little worrisome. Okay? We haven't watched the Zohran Daily Show interview yet. We will, obviously. Yeah, this was the bad one. Cuomo cuts Mamdani's lead by 10 points after Adams' exit. In a Suffolk University poll conducted around the same time, Mamdani's lead over Cuomo was more narrow, with 44% to Cuomo's 34%. Sliwa followed with 11%. Early voting is underway in New York City, and the ballot, which still includes candidates like incumbent Mayor Eric Adams, who have suspended their campaigns, cannot be altered. But the Manhattan Institute survey still asks voters about the hypothetical head-to-head matchups. Between just Mamdani and Cuomo, the gap narrows, but Mamdani maintains his edge, 44% to 40%. In a hypothetical matchup with Sliwa, Mamdani leads 47% to 33%. Mamdani has focused his campaign on affordability, proposing programs such as free buses, which he says would be paid for by increasing tax on the wealthiest New Yorkers and raising the corporate tax rate. He also is focused on crime prevention, saying the city has relied on police to deal with the failures of our social safety net. Despite Mamdani's commanding lead in the new poll, New York City residents are less convinced by some of his practical proposals. A majority of respondents in the poll oppose making all New York City buses fare-free. Asked to select the statement closest to their view, 58% agreed that making buses free for everyone sounds nice, but it would make things worse in practice. It would turn buses into rolling shelters for homeless people and drug addicts, invite more crime and antisocial behavior, and leave even less money to fix the slow and unreliable service. Except it hasn't happened in the pilot program. That's what's so crazy about it. Like, the solution to this fear-mongering is just simply to point to the pilot program that Zohran actually pushed. It was an immense success. A third of the respondents, meanwhile, selected the following statement. Bus service should be fast and free, universally accessible. Eliminating fares will make public transit more affordable and efficient for working New Yorkers while reducing conflicts between riders and operators. Asked about the fare evasion on subways, 60% of respondents said allowing the practice to go unchecked invites more crime and freeloading, while enforcing payment helps maintain order and safety. Only 30% said fare evasion is mostly harmless and should not be policed aggressively, and that enforcement criminalizes poverty. And you have to remember, like, fast and free buses literally already exist in other cities around the United States of America. That's what's so nutty about this. The working class is so right-wing, it's crazy. No, man. The working class is just heavily propagandized. In the absence of any sort of counter messaging from the left on issues such as this one, of course, the only thing they hear is stabbings happening on buses by crazy homeless people. And when they see homeless people on the street screaming and shit, they go, oh my God, crime is out of control. What is fast? Buses with racing stripes and a spoiler. Exactly. Yeah, in ski towns, all public transportation is free all over America. Not a singular problem there. Yeah, because, you know, white people are going out to ski. Anyway, New Yorkers were more inclined to support raising the corporate tax rate on business at the state level in order to pay for new social programs. In New York City's 53% supported it, while 39% opposed it. Okay? It's easy to make someone more racist, but not more anti-capitalist. Yes, that is by design. Just like it's literally a million times easier to make people anti-Semitic rather than making them anti-Israel from an anti-imperialist framework. Okay? That's it. Americans are super duper tuned in to racialized messages. It's so easy to get them to be on board with the anti-Israel message by just simply being anti-Semitic. It's much easier to do that.
Literally
100%.
Everyone else on Earth behaves the exact same way.
Anyway, just like it's much easier to engage in Islamophobic narratives rather than try to make people pro-Israel or even pro-Jewish at this point, right? That false conflation is stuck. in the minds of many people. Is the stream getting brigaded? Why is it in 3-month only follower only mode? What do you think? Yes. Like all the time. Nonstop. Wait, what is this? Ben a minute.
If you've been online for the past
infiltrated the Groiper army. Stud, by the way. Ben a minute. Stud. We'll look at that later. How is he going to make the buses faster? He's just going to tell the people to put the pedal to the metal. No, fast and free buses means more buses. More bus lines. That's it. Yeah, they're gonna put racing stripes on the side of the buses. Yeah. Bus lanes could be one way to do that. Dedicated bus lanes could be one way to do that, and having more buses as well. Also, when you no longer have fare to worry about at the point of entry, that also automatically makes the buses faster too. And also, obviously, the thing that we are refusing to reckon with here, which is racing stripes. Everybody knows racing stripes actually make cars faster. Hasan Reactions is one of the best ones in the React channel.